Recording has begun. It's great to see so many of you joining this morning. I know I've got a few more people that have said that they may drop in. I think it's pretty hectic first week back in education for some people, or preparing to open again next week. I'm based in the UK, just to contextualize things, but I know that I've got people joining from various countries, so welcome wherever you are from. You are really welcomed in, and I would love to show you what OneNote Class Notebook can do and how it might be useful for you working with pupils or students, whichever educational phase you are in. Today, you can either unmute your mic or you can place questions into the conversation on the side, and I will pop back periodically and pick those up and do my best to answer them. We're going to be focusing on today how to get OneNote Class Notebook set up for class teams. We're going to focus exclusively on that. So the focus really is working in the classroom with OneNote Class Notebook rather than just working with OneNote more generally, although we will touch upon elements of that and how it might lend itself to supporting you in things like planning or using it for meetings. We will have a look first of all at how OneNote is structured and how it lends itself to link with other applications in Office 365 from Microsoft. We'll examine just how you get one set up, and we'll go through that process and then think about what's best practice to use it in the classroom. Before I start and I go any further, has anybody been using it with students and pupils and want to share any experiences? Not at the moment. That's okay. Don't be shy. If you do want to talk to me later, you are welcome to do so. Moving down through, we are going to also today give you a code at the end of the session, which you can redeem to become a certified Microsoft Innovative Educator, or an MIE. That will give you 1,000 points in the Microsoft Education Center. If you haven't been to the Microsoft Education Center before, it's a resource that Microsoft has absolutely free. And what you can do is go in there and look at professional development courses. It might be you're just interested in something, and there will be a guided course you can work through from Microsoft, and then that will give you some accreditation at the end. You can get badges, but you also get points. By coming along this morning, we will give you a code that's worth 1,000 points at the end of the session, and those 1,000 points can be then redeemed to automatically make you a certified MIE if you aren't already. If you are and you think colleagues would like to watch this, they can always watch this video back, and this code will remain valid after the session. If anybody hasn't yet used the Microsoft Education Center, I've just popped it in the conversation, so you can click on that link and it will open up in your web browser. The Microsoft Education Center itself, you'll need to sign into it, and there's a top right hand corner a sign in button, but once you're signed in, you'll be able to redeem the code later in this session. If you aren't signed up yet, you can either use your professional address given to you by your school or your college, or you can sign up using a personal email address. It doesn't matter either way, but you will need to do that to redeem codes. Once you've started on your journey of completing courses in the Microsoft Education Center and you are a certified MIE, you may decide to move further. So something else that Microsoft offers is the Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert course. That will open again in January and then in July 2022. If you think you're really finding massive benefits from using technology in the classroom, then the MIE accreditation and qualification might be for you. Some people go further still and they become a digital leader in their school and start to embrace what's called Showcase School, where the school moves towards impacting learning and, in fact, all aspects of the school positively using technology. We'll come back to that later on in the presentation. As I said, I will give you a code for that. But for now, let's move back into OneNote Class Notebook. So as I said, when you've got OneNote class notebook, as the screenshot shows you there, it's organized so that you've got sections and pages, and you'll see that live next. But the first thing we'll do is we'll just examine how we can build and flesh out that OneNote class notebook. If you haven't done it before, you can see how that's done. If you have done it before and you're doing it a slightly different way to what we're showing you today, I'm always interested in hearing how things are done in other organizations or other educational institutions. It's one of the great things about running these sessions is I get to talk to people and get great insights and get ideas. One of the things that you're going to see quite quickly is OneNote and OneNote Class Notebook is best friends with Teams. Works really well within Teams and in isolation. It can work in a web browser and it also works as a dedicated app, but they do go hand in hand very well, particularly for classroom learning. If you are going to use OneNote Class Notebook, it's only available in what's called a class team. There's 4 different types of teams. And although today we're not focusing on teams exclusively, you will need to know that if you set up a team that is a PLC or a staff team or another team, which is a more generic team, you'll get OneNote. But if you set up a class team, you'll get OneNote Class Notebook, which is what we're going to be using today. When you're coming to set it up and you've decided to create your team, you've got 2 ways of having your OneNote class notebooks created. They can either be done manually, which is what we're going to show you today, and still the vast majority of people will use manual creation and management. But increasingly with school data sync or school information sync, you can link Teams and OneNote class notebook to your MIS system. And what you can have is make your IT admins create a set of templates with things like subject leaders in secondary schools, or in middles and primaries it might be phase leaders. And when you have your OneNote class notebook created, instead of you having to make sections and pages, which we'll do next, it can come straight from a template, which cuts down on the workload for teachers. I'm very, very enthusiastic, as being a teacher previously, on not burdening teachers with another thing to do and just give them the tools to do the job, and the technology enhances what they're going to do instead of being a hindrance. The other dilemma when you are setting up OneNote class notebook and Teams for that matter is how much you give to in the way of permissions from the student perspective and the teacher perspective to adjust things. We'll talk about them as we go through. If you can really trust the students you're working with, maybe you're working with sixth formers in UK terms, so that would be 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. They are responsible enough to manage their own sections and they want that freedom to do so. But you might be working with upper primary school age children that are 8, 9, 10, and you want that to be a bit more controlled from a teacher perspective. So you do need to decide on the settings and the permissions. And again, your IT admins can set that, but if you're also the owner of a team, you can set some of that too. For those people joining the first time, you're thinking, well, I haven't really embraced OneNote, and that's why I've come along to this session. That's fine. Trying to get your head around it, the best analogy I can use is think of OneNote class notebook or OneNote as a digital ring binder or a lever arch folder. Inside that digital ring binder or lever arch folder, if it was a physical real world example, you'd have cardboard dividers with little tabs sticking out, and you probably write the name of the information that's going to be in that section on the tabs. When you leaf through the paper, you can find the bits you want, and it's indexed and it's easy to use. Well, OneNote works in a really similar way, but instead of filing either hole punched paper or pre-punched line paper, squared paper, however you're using your paper in that physical file, you're putting digital pages into digital sections, and the OneNote is the overall system, the overall binder where that all lives. And then within that is pretty much a blank canvas. You can do whatever you want with it. It scrolls endlessly in different directions, and you'll see what you can put onto the surface of that page is really, it's inspiring. I found it so liberating. Even though I've worked in schools where we had set pieces of board software, I've tended to move away from that and adopt OneNote class notebook. And also professionally, if I've moved from school to school, or I'm somebody who doesn't teach in the same school every day, or maybe I've got a school where we've got different campuses or different buildings, and maybe there's different technologies in those buildings, my single go-to point has been OneNote class notebook, because I can open it up and I don't even have to have the software installed. I open it up in any web browser and it will just run, and I could use that to teach, and I know all my information is there and it's syncing to the cloud. So even if I'm at home and I've been planning before, or I need to look at something when I go back home that night, it's there for me, and I haven't got to worry about, oh, I left my planner in school, or I haven't got access to that student's book. It can be there in the cloud, and it can be there in one single place. And then once you've considered how you want to set it up and how you want to navigate it, we today will touch at the end of the session on how to review work from students and distribute it, and also leave feedback for them too. So there's quite a bit to get through today. So without any further delay, I'm going to swap over. Well, I'm just swapping screens. Has anybody got any questions or anything they'd like to share with us at this point? Remember, you can always pop questions into the conversation. I'll come and pick them up from there as well. Right, so when we land in Office 365, depending on how you have got your Office 365 set up, you may land on the landing page, you may go straight into your Outlook. It's up to you as to, you can set it as personal preference, but also your IT admins might set that. Thank you for confirming, Kate. All is good. We will today move from that, and I'm going to start looking first of all at Teams, and we aren't going to labour this very long. In here, I've got a couple of demo teams. These are class teams, as I showed you in the presentation a few minutes ago. Inside the class teams, I'm going to look at a primary one as an example here. With the new organisation of teams that came about just before the summer, things like Class Notebook used to be tabs across the top. They've now moved over to the side here. So my Class Notebook, my OneNote Class Notebook is there, and if I click on it, it will load up quite happily inside of my team. We said we would examine just how those were created, and in this example, this fully fledged team, it's already here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you back and show you from the beginning how to make this. If I duck back out of my class team, if you've got permissions to do so, up in the top right hand corner you may have the button where you can click join and create team. I'll go back and do that again. In the top right hand corner, join and create team. If you click that, depending on your permissions, you may have permissions to create a team, or you may only have permissions to join a team when you're given a code. If you need to create a team, then you'll have to get the permissions assigned to you by whoever administrates your system. When you go into create a team, you choose a class team and then you go through and name it, and what you'll get is a skeleton of a class team to start using. Once that's been set up, and I've got one here called Turn It On Test Class, you will end up coming in, and your class notebook, when you click on it, will look like this. It won't have anything displayed in it, and all you'll get is a setup prompt. When you click the Setup OneNote Class Notebook, you'll have two options. You can either create from a blank beginning of the story OneNote Class Notebook, or if you've got existing notebooks you've used in previous years and you know all of the sections are structured the way you'd like them to be, you might be a primary school teacher and you taught year 5 in the previous year, you know you're going to be teaching year 5 again, you'd like to have the same page titles and section titles, you can bring it in from existing content. But today we're going to focus on setting it up from scratch. So we'll go blank notebook. This screen here tells you a little bit about, we'll explain more in the future, about the different sections you'll get and how they work and function for teachers and students. So there's nothing you can change there, you just click next. And then you'll come into a section where you can choose the names of the sections that you'll get underneath the student sections. By default, what Teams will try to do is give you some headings that it thinks are generically useful, but because it's covering all educational phases, you'll very quickly go, do you know what, that doesn't suit me. So we might not have quizzes, and I might get rid of that. We are going to keep homework, but I might change class notes to classwork. Handouts I might leave, and then I might have challenge work for when I have got a personal challenge for the students and I want to give it to them. And that can go there. You can add as many sections as you want, and what that will do, when you press create, it will create all of those sections underneath every single student. You will also get a section titled for each student name, and that's picked up from the data that either your administrator has entered for the people that are members of your class team, or it will pick up from the data sync from your MIS system. And in your MIS system, whoever administrates that in your school, it will pick up the students and the pupils in a class and the teachers, and it will add them in automatically. So that's what I meant by the two ways to get the names in. Increasingly, people are using sync platforms rather than doing this manually every single summer. I'm just going to discard that one and show you what it looks like once it's set itself up. So if I go back into my primary classroom again and I go to my class notebook, when you come in, you'll get your welcome to class notebook screen, and that just gives you a little bit of orientation if you haven't joined a session like today, because not everybody is going to go on and look at training in the Microsoft Education Centre or come to a session. On the left hand side here, I've got some icons we're going to become familiar with. Start navigation really slides the page across to the right so you can see sections and pages, and then across the top here you've got toolbars, and you've got the same ribbon system that's in Office 365 where you click on different tabs and you get different ribbons for input. If you want to get more space and you're going to use this inside of Teams, you can press the two arrows to expand, and then it will get rid of all the clutter on the side of Teams, or you can then retract that and it will bring it back so you can navigate. Or you can press the go to website and it will open up in an online version. And to save time of things loading, here is what OneNote Class Notebook looks like as a separate tab in the browser. It can also be opened up in the OneNote software. Now at the moment, the OneNote software is slightly confusing, that you can have a version of OneNote that comes with Windows 10 or Windows 11 as it soon will be. You've also got a version of OneNote that can be included with Office 365 Desktop. That's the one you download from your Office 365 subscription, or it might be from Office 2019, for instance. And they all have slightly different layouts. For ease of navigation, I tend to either stick to the online version. Here is a tab in the web browser, and I'm using Microsoft's Edge browser today, but it will work just as happily in things like Google Chrome browser or Firefox browser. It will not work any longer in Internet Explorer. So if you've got Internet Explorer, please don't use it. It will give you all sorts of trouble. If you're going to use the app, I tend to ignore the version that comes with Office, and I use the version that's in Windows 10. It's got all the tools that you will need. 98% of the tools that you will use are in the browser version. There's the odd thing that's unique to the app that you might need to use, such as the way that you review classwork, or the way you might rename these sections after they've been created. But we're running other sessions later in the autumn about more advanced features of managing OneNote. Today we're just looking at getting it set up. So you've got your welcome section, and that's the page that you will all land on when you first created your OneNote. And then down the left hand side you've got some pre-created sections. I today in my demo version only have a few demo pupils and students down the left. You'd probably have about 30 in your class depending on which country you're from, but you will always in a OneNote class notebook have certain sections that are delivered to you that are decided by Microsoft, but they are really useful, and we'll go through how to use them next. The collaboration space is a space that can be used by pupils, students and staff to work together. Both students and staff have equal rights to edit, add content, delete content. So you need to talk about being respectful of each other's work, not overwriting it, and thinking about how you're going to work together. If it was English, let's say we're working in here, I've put in a section header for English. So all I've done is I've clicked the add section button, given it a name, I've pressed OK, and then it will appear here. Once you've got your sections created, you can right click to rename them if you want to rename them as anything at any time. When I said about restrictions in settings, if you don't want students to be able to rename, you can take that ability away from them in the settings in the admin console part of Office 365 and have it only teachers can rename, or you can allow them to rename. But a word of caution, I've given that permission to younger pupils and students before, and they've tended to push the boundaries and rename them sometimes into either fictional things, such as come in and they're entirely Marvel characters, or they are rude things. So I tend to lock them down in a primary school, and if I'm in a secondary school, as it is in the UK, I give some freedom and I'll begin to unlock them and give them some choices about how that might work. You can also color your sections to color code them. You can add new pages from here. You can add new sections from there. You can also copy the link. So if you were doing things as we were in last week's training session, using a section or a page in a OneNote class notebook with a homework, you can get the link there to link to the homework. You can also drag these up and down and reorder them. And that will move them around there as well. So there's quite a bit of customization that you can have in the sections, and the same is duplicated over there in the pages. Because we are in the collaboration space, it might be that we've got a music lesson, and in that music lesson I'm going to ask my different groups of pupils around my class to use different instruments. They are tasked with popping in a picture of the instrument they're using and then ticking it off, and they've had a go at playing it. So we're using this in a very simplistic way to track the names of the pupils, the instrument they're using, given a picture, and they're using inking, which we'll look at in a bit, to ink straight onto the page. Now with a page, you can pop just about anything on there. It can be typed text, it can be pictures, it can be animations, it could be GIFs, it could be videos. You can even embed files onto the page, and you can put audio clips onto the page as well. So it is truly a universal canvas for you to embrace in different ways. Or here is another example. We're looking at the topic of Egypt, and we're going around the class, and I've assigned different groups of pupils in my class different historical aspects to go away and research. So for instance, housing is going to be assigned to certain named pupils, food, culture, religion, and so forth. And then they might be then recording what they find in the way of notes, or it could be pictorial, it could be an embedded video, as I said, and it comes back in here. And the collaboration space allows me, on those occasions I want the class to work together as a whole, to either have all of my pupils in one page, or what you could do is you could add more pages here. So you could have, instead of just Egypt, you could add a page in saying, it might be Egypt, and we're going to have housing, and then each small group of pupils have their own page here, and instead of it being on one page, they're all on separate pages, but the pupils can all flick in between and borrow bits. And it is truly collaboration, but digitally in the cloud. Now, we may be, with uncertain times, moving back to having some pupils or students with us physically. Others may be working remotely. Maybe they haven't been able to join us because they can't travel back from certain countries. But what OneNote Class Notebook could do is, regardless of where they are in the world, they could join us on Teams, and they could see the same digital canvas to work together at once. And if they're sat at home in their parents' house and you've got the other group of pupils with you in class, you could still be working online together, and they can see as much of what's going on as if they were in the classroom, because it's there. I would tend to have this, if I was working collaboratively, up on the board, because it promotes good use and good digital citizenship, and people tend to put less in the way of not unconstructive, let's say, things onto the piece of paper or the digital paper, but it then builds the picture so you can share good practice quickly and easily as well. So that's the collaboration space. It is truly collaborative, but everyone can edit, everyone can delete, everyone can modify. So it isn't always the type of space you'll want to use, and that's why we've got the second area. That's the content library. For me as a teacher, the content library is an amazing asset. Again, I've added some sections here. I'm working in the primary situation, so I've got English, maths and science. But if I was working, let's say, science, got a science test I've started to write here about forces. I would like my pupils to come in here and have a go at answering this test. But unlike the collaboration space, they can't write on top of it. I can add it to it, so it might be it might be I put another question in here. So what is upthrust? And that might be something for them to add in or ink on top of, but they will then have to take a copy of that page. Now, we spoke about getting work out, and if they're old enough, they can right click, take a copy and add it. If I was Henry, add it to my own folder down here. So when I started creating and choosing my sections, I gave Henry a science section. So he could, just like taking a piece of physical photocopy paper in the classroom, he could take a copy of this digital paper and add it into his science folder, as long as he's old enough to do so. We'll look at it later at how to do that for pupils and students if they aren't able to do that. But that's then controlled by me. That means that pupils and students can't overwrite the original. They can't modify it. They can look at it so it's view only, but they can't destroy it, unlike Collaboration Space, where they could modify it if they wish to. So content library, read and write for me. I can edit to my heart's content, but read only for pupils until they take a copy and pop it into their own area, and then they can edit the copy they've taken. The final area that you're given in OneNote Class Notebook is teachers only. I'm logged in as a teacher when I'm currently delivering this training with you today. Teacher only is not visible to pupils. Pupils would only see Collaboration Space and Content Library. The teachers only is private to me, and what I can get on with doing is creating resources in advance. So I might have some planning time. I might be working, prepping a lesson before school, after school, so I can keep it tucked away in here until I'm ready to get it out and use it in class. So it could be that it's just a set of websites I want them to use, and they're going to independently use the tablets that we've got in school, or the IT suite, or the laptops that we've got in the classroom. And instead of them looking around, they come into the page, and I'll move that page into the content library. They click the links, and it means they haven't got to go browsing. From an e-safety and safeguarding perspective, it means I know where they are, and they should only be using websites that are on that page. So it's easier for me to manage the learning in the classroom, and they haven't got to worry about typing URLs in. It could be I'm setting up an inquiry. So we've got some cars where maybe we're looking at real world cars. We're going to make some cars modeled out of plasticine or Play-Doh, and we're going to look at things like streamlining, and that's going to be part of a bigger discussion about forces such as friction between the tires as well. So I've made this lesson here, and it's sat at the moment in my teachers only area, so it's private to me. Pupils have got no idea this exists, no idea it's coming, but I can have this ready to go. And when I'm ready to use it, I could right click over it and I could take a copy, or I could go to move copy and I could move a copy out into the content library for them to pick up and then have a copy themselves, or I can move it to Collaboration Space, because actually what I'd like them to do is put all of their findings here underneath. So it depends on the way I'm working with the class. But there are other ways that you can get work out, so it seems like a timely thing to do to show you that next. I'll just finish off the sections by saying all of my pupils have mirrored sections. So they've all got the same ones in there, and with my settings that I've got, they can't delete those, they can't reword those. But what they can do is they can put their work in there. So if, for instance, they were doing some work on videos, they can pop that in there, and then I can go and view that. I can navigate between all my different pupils there on the left. And there are other ways to view people work, which we can look at the end. But for me, it's a bit like having all of their books with me all of the time. Or another way of thinking of it is that this section here, being Henry, is the pupil or the student, and then these individual sections are like their books for maths if it was primary, or their books for English. And then I could set up pages within maths. It might be number, shape and measure, it could be anything like that, and then that's the pages in the book, so I can always look it up. But the other beauty of it is they can always view it as well, so wherever they are, as long as they've got an internet connection, they can get back to the work they were doing in class. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that this will replace using paper books and pencils and pens. It doesn't. But what it will do is it will give you greater scope for accessibility to learning wherever you are and whenever you need it, because you can go in and check, they can go in and check, and it might be they need some support of what they were doing in class that day to do a piece of paper homework. Well, that's fine, because it's all there. I fully understand that with students and pupils using this, one of the big limiting factors might be the number of devices that you have available for them to log in on. So you may have to say, well, it's going to be a project or it's going to be a certain piece of work. And in that piece of work, I'm going to book the laptops to come to the classroom, or I'm going to book the IT suite, and that's going to go in OneNote Class Notebook. And that's the one thing we do during the year in OneNote Class Notebook, and everything else is on paper. It might be that you've got a luxury situation. You've got one-to-one devices. Maybe you're working in the independent sector, and that's funded by the parents when they join the school. But you could then have greater scope for using OneNote Class Notebook more readily. Kate, I can see you've got a question. So can students view content in each other's folders? No, they will only see the content in their folders. So if you want them to view each other's work, it's got to go in the collaboration space. But if I was Henry, for instance, I would see, because I'm logged in as a teacher, but if I was logged in as Henry, who would be a pupil, I see collaboration space, content library, and my own folder, Henry. I wouldn't see any of those other pupils. I only ever see the other pupils here because I'm currently logged in as a teacher. So it's entirely private to the individual. It's not going to be that someone else can dip into another pupil's work and start to borrow bits or deface it and upset them in that way. Okay, does that answer the question for you? Is there anything else you'd like to know about that aspect? I'll carry on, but do pop something in the conversation if you need to get any further clarification on that. Great, thank you, Kate. The way to get work distributed, and this seems like a really good point to do that before we come back to some of the tools that we've got available and we look a bit more about what we can put onto a page. If I went back to my teachers only section, and it might be here, I've got useful science websites, and those useful science websites, I just want to get a copy out. Instead of putting it into the content library, I'd like a copy in every pupil's folder there. Well, that's fine. You can do that without a lot of work. So if we went to Class Notebook tab at the top here, and this is the same whether I'm using online or app, you can distribute to a new section. So you could, if you wanted, have the name of the science inquiry appear in the pupil section. So you could distribute this page to a new section, and that's what this button is here for. Or you can distribute the page, which is more likely what you do because you've chosen the sections that you'd like to have under each individual pupil or student. If I go into distribute page, I can distribute it individually, or I can distribute it to a group. I'm going to show you group distribution first. If I click on that button, a menu will pop out from the right hand side. That will load up my options, and I can distribute either to an individual group or I can distribute to a whole class group. Here I've got some groups already set up, and I've used these previously, and the great thing is in OneNote Class Notebook, those groups are remembered. If you want to set up a new group, you scroll to the bottom where the purple writing is there, click new group, and if I had 30 pupils and students, they would all appear in this list. I can give that group a name, so I might call it test for this instance, and I might say, look, I'm only going to have Sydney and Susanna in there, and then I save it, and when I press save, and I won't add to my list, it would appear here in my list of groups. So if it was me teaching English class rather than science, I might have one group called science, and I know that when I want to get science work out to my class, I haven't got to worry about ticking all the pupils individually. I've got everyone here, and I can go in and they're all listed there. If I ever want to edit that, I can always press the edit button. I could rename the group and tick and untick people. So if I wanted to add in my demo student there, I can press save, and then they're in the list, and all of a sudden there's the student I've added in, so that when I come to distribute, I could tick the whole class English group, and then it allows me to move on. Or I could use group work to be more targeted, that a group of pupils I know are making exceptional progress and they need something to extend their learning and challenge them. So it might be that they are in a particular set or they're in a particular group. So it could be that I've got an intervention group if this was maths, and I might say it's set 1, and I click next, and after I've clicked next, I choose the folder that I want this to be in. Well, this is science website, so I click on science and I press distribute, and then digitally what OneNote does is it throws out a sheet of paper, and that sheet of paper will end up in every folder of every pupil or student that we've got over here in their sections, and then they will be able to go in and pick it up and add anything they like to it, but it never destroys or ruins my original copy. So that is distributing to groups. But you might have the reverse of that, where you get an individual pupil or pupils come up gradually throughout a lesson, and they say, look, completed the main focus of the lesson, and I've done the extension work, could have some challenge work, or I'm finding this a little bit difficult, could have something else. And you know, as a teacher, you've got a differentiated resource, so you've got something that covers essentially the learning that you've planned for the lesson, but at a lower level, either to get them on board and then make progress to expected, or because you need to differentiate for them and you want them to not feel demoralized and you want them to feel like they can be successful in learning. So if this was, let's go back to the science of the racing cars resource, you can go to distribute page again. This time I'm going to go to individual distribution instead of group distribution. Again, you get a menu that pops out from the side. Here, it will show you your 30 pupils or students if you've got a full class, and I've only got my 4. It might be that Susanna is the person that's come up. And okay, say to Susanna, okay, I can see that you've clearly demonstrated you understand friction forces. Can you take what you've learned from friction forces and look at car tires in this example? So I click Susanna, I go to next. Susanna, I'm going to pop this into your science folder. So when you go back to your desk, or if you're at your desk and you're talking to me across the classroom, it's going to be in there in a moment. I press distribute. What that does is it distributes out. You can see here from a teacher point of view, it gives you a percentage of distribution. Now, whether you're doing 30, 50 or 1, it's about the same length of time as you've just seen there to get a piece of digital paper out. And then I went to Susanna's area down here. And I scroll down on the side, I might just get rid of that. And I go to a science folder. In here now is the science of racing cars, and along with the science test she did last week, she's now got the page and she can continue writing on that page. So to get work out is really easy, and if you don't have the pupils and students with you, it's another way to make sure that everyone has access to learning. And as I said, it can then be revisited at any time that suits you as a teacher or suits them as a pupil or a student. Any questions on structuring your class notebook or distributing your work all at this point? Otherwise, I'll go on to using the page and creating content and what you can put onto the content of the page itself. No? Okay. One thing I will show you just before we move into the page itself is that in the Windows version, and that is the Windows 10 version of this, if I just swap screens for you ever so quickly and show you what Windows 10 OneNote looks like, just moving over there. So now this is the desktop app rather than the online version. You will see I'm in the class notebook tab. I've got the same options I had on the online version, distribute page, distribute section, but you've got some other sections over here, and this allows you to manage the notebook. So if you decided, for instance, that you wanted to get another section in, but you didn't want to just add it for Sydney, you wanted to add it for all 30 pupils and students, it's just a laborious task if you've got to go through and you've got to type in a new section by adding one section at a time, student by student. It will absolutely kill your brain. So if you go into manage notebooks, and I think mine is not being that useful this morning, it's not going to be that useful this morning, it's spawning another tab, but what it will do is it will take you back into that setup view where it says welcome class notebook, and you can add another section for all students, press create, and what it will do is it will quickly add them through. So there are a few subtle differences between the online version and the desktop version, and those buttons there normally are the ones that people look for after they get used to it. And if you've been using the online version and you think, well, where are some of those options, you do have to go to the desktop version to get those. I'm just going to swap back over and go and pick those up again on the online version. Moving back. Should take me back in, and you should be able to see the car demo. So I'm going to stay at the moment in, I'm going to leave the teacher sections, I'm going to stay in Susanna, and Susanna's now got the page about racing cars. So with the options across the top, you can start to insert different things. So if you click on the page, you've got to have clicked on the page to get a cursor flashing. It will unghost the options at the top, and you can start to pop in resources. So you can add a table. So it might be that from her inquiry, she's got fictional set of materials to make car tires out of, to look at friction forces. So she's going to have force in newtons maybe to pull the material across a surface, or maybe she's using a rubber tire and she's got different surfaces. So we're going to quickly say with Susanna, we're going to set up a table. So here we're going to say it's material, and here it might be force in newtons, and then it might be we have, I don't know, slate, wood, but this is only now appearing on Susanna's, and it's not appearing on anyone else's. And then we find out that the force here was 30 newtons and so forth. So she can merrily start recording the outcomes of her inquiry really independently. She's learning at the pace she needs to. The rest of the class are learning at the pace they need to. And I'm facilitating all of this through OneNote class notebook. It's another way of doing what you would have done traditionally. As well as in here having the fact that I can insert a table, I can insert pictures. So those pictures can be from online or they can be from a file. They can be animated or static. So if you want to bring something to life, you could go to online. You don't have to leave OneNote class notebook. The online search comes up here. So it might be car GIFs. Let's see what comes up. Your filtering on your school broadband would filter out anything that was inappropriate. And that is taken care of to prevent your pupils or students finding anything that they shouldn't. Now, if it's going to work this morning, it should come up with a car GIF. So it might be, and you won't see it animated here, but you will see it animated hopefully when it goes in. Let's try putting that one in, insert. And if it is animated, instead of it being a static picture, you will end up with an animated picture there on the page, and it's inserting the image. Well, I might want to move that image across a bit so I can grab the tab, so everything comes in its own box. Let that insert at the same time while we're doing some other things. What you can do is you can create a link to a website. So if you wanted to, as a pupil, demonstrate that you've understood full text or just a link, so you could use a YouTube video, it could be a video in SharePoint, and those videos will sit quite nicely on the page. There we go, there's the animated GIF table. You could, as a teacher, when you come to mark, you might say, well, I'm going to give some feedback to Susanna. She's clearly worked really hard. She's completed some extension work here, and I want to make sure that she gets that positive reinforcement, but also get some extension for where to go next to push her further forwards. I could do that in a few different ways. So I could just type, and I could add a comment in, well done, Susanna. I really can't type this morning. And it could go from there. Or it could be that I type in using ink, or sorry, I ink in. So I could go to draw, and up here I've got a really simplistic set of drawing tools. You can choose things like highlighters. So I might say, look, I'm really interested in what you've done there. So slate and wood, if I highlight rather than there we go. So it might be slate and wood. Well, I'm interested in that. I've highlighted that. And then I might go and pick up a pencil. I'll put that in blue, and I might be, and I haven't got a stylus this morning, so I'm doing this on a trackpad, which is appallingly bad. That's supposed to say what, and I won't carry on any further, but I can ink onto the screen. Now, I can also do this if I've got an interactive board in my classroom. I can ink directly onto OneNote class notebook. And that's why I often find that a lot of people that start to use this in the classroom will abandon their board software and start to use this, because it gives them the flexibility. Even Inco you can use in here. You've got your color palettes to change other colors, differences of lines. Now, it won't have all the advanced tools that you've got in every bit of board software, but what you soon find is what it allows you to do on the page itself makes up for that. You've also got things like maths tools, which hopefully I'll have time to show you at the end. The other way, if you go back to insert, if I click on my page, I could, if I want to go back, let's go out draw, and I go back to that, insert there. I could go back and have a audio clip, and I could put an audio clip in. It would help if I selected the right option. I could put an audio clip in, so the audio clip will ask me to have give access to my browser, so it's going to give access to the mic on my computer through my browser. You'll notice up here the ribbon has changed and there's a stop recording, so I might want to say, that's great, Susanna, I can clearly see that you have found out that rubber tires on a wood surface has the most friction. Would you be able to give me a quick explanation below as to why you think that has the most friction? I'm now going to stop the recording, and then what Susanna can do, and I normally show my students this over a period of weeks. I give them typed, inked feedback and audio feedback, but what they love is the audio feedback because they can hear the teacher's voice, and particularly if they've got learning needs and actually the barrier to reading feedback is the written word, well, they can play the audio feedback, and when they click on it they can just press the play button. I won't do it because it will be me talking again, and they can listen to what I've said as a teacher, and they could give me audio feedback as well. They could go to the insert tab and they could leave me a clip back to what I've left to them. So again, it can suit for EAL, it can suit for learning needs, so it gives, again, better access to learning. In here as well, I won't go through them all, you can insert different symbols. The maths tool itself is a really useful thing, and I'll show you that in a separate tab. You've also got emojis. You will need to talk about sensible use of those. You can embed a Microsoft form into a OneNote page. If I click down here, let's go right down the page, and I pop a form in, well, it will want me to sign in, so I'll just quickly sign in to my forms, and it can either pick up a quiz I've used somewhere else, or I can start a new form or a new quiz. So I might use this to check progress in learning. So there we go, let's use untitled quiz, insert it, and then it will sit in the page. So here I didn't do a lot with this untitled quiz and it hasn't got a question in it, but I could go back in and edit it, and then as a teacher, I might prepare a form, and instead of the form being a separate application they go to as a tab in their web browser or Office 365, they could have it embedded into their OneNotes page. Stickers, I use quite a lot, particularly with primary pupils. It might be I'm really happy with something, and I can... Oh, it's going to restart. It's having a hissy fit. I can drop a sticker onto a page if OneNote doesn't have a funny moment, and that can show that I'm happy with it instead of actually writing some written feedback. Just going to reload the page there for you. It's one of those added extras. So that's insert and that's draw. The view will allow you to enable other accessibility tools like Immersive Reader, and we've got a separate session coming up in the autumn about Immersive Reader and how that will turn text into the page into a version that can be played, or you can adjust it for things like visual impairments. You can have a reader view where it will come up like a book. You can even change page color here, so you can change the color in the background. At the moment it's got no color. That tends to be if you want different styles of page background, such as you might use script for music or lines. All of that can be done, but that has to be done in the desktop version, the Windows 10 version. There's not an option to do anything other than colors in page color in the online version. So there is some limitations, as I've said, between the two, but they are pretty much there whichever way you want to go. So it might be I need a pale green background. That may not show up particularly well for you online. A few people said that. Now it's a pale pink background, and that might be so that somebody can read it because they've got a visual need in my class. You can go back to different versions of the page as well. So if somebody's overwritten something and made a change, you can go back and get it from there. Then you're back to the class notebook tab, and the class notebook tab is where we distributed earlier. If you want to review work of students, instead of going through, and as I've done, looked at Henry's or Susanna's, you can go to review student work. And as I said, we will go into more depth about this when we do one of our other sessions, but it might be you're interested in the homework section in every student. You click that, you go to next, and then what you can do is you can review the different pages that might be in the homework section. So I'm really interested in the math shape work, click next, and then I can go through and I can review that for every, and it will only show the students that have that. But if I've given that piece of homework to everyone, it will show all 30 of them there, and I can go through, and then that page will show up here to save me going through and navigating that way. So you can review the class work that way. One other tool that I wanted to show you, so let's go back to teacher and maths, I believe it is. In here, I might have a calculation I've written on the board. I've inked that in, and what I want to do is I want to use the maths tools that are built into Teams itself to help me as a teacher. Why not? You go to maths, and what it does, it shows you the right equation. Well, I've got a calculation on the board, and you need to select it, and the maths tool can be activated. So if I drag out over the top, it will pick up what I've written. Click the maths tool will come out from the side, and OneNote class notebook will do its best to interpret what you've got. So if you've got a operation or a number that's been detected incorrectly, you can fix it by pressing the fix it button, but here it has detected it correctly. You can ink it back as typed text by ink to maths, but this can be a good teacher tool, but also a good student tool. And it's a great example of why you might choose to use OneNote class notebook and something that's not going to be in board software. Go to select action. So it might be that you want to know an evaluation of what the answer is, because you've gone through as a student, you've worked it out, but you're not sure. The teacher's busy talking to a small group or working through an activity with a small group. You haven't got the answer. No one else has finished yet, so I want to evaluate. I evaluate the answer is A. Okay, if that's the answer I've got, I might be satisfied. Fantastic, I can move on to the next question, because clearly the method I'm using is correct. It might be that I need to see the steps, so I can get solution steps. Now, I fully appreciate that there are lots of different ways mathematically to get to an answer, and there might be some that are the preferred method that you teach and others that you don't want to use. But what OneNote does is it gives the best and the most simplistic way of getting to the answer. So if they are stuck and they didn't get the answer, they can look at it there. The other thing you can do is you can generate a quiz. So let's go, if I want to change the resolution of the screen here, I think the resolution is the thing that's tripping me up. If I scroll down, hopefully I can get down there now. It's not going to let me. It won't let me if I go out of evaluate. I'll tell you what, let's come out of the maths tool entirely and I'll come back in again. Maths tool, it might be evaluate what the answer is. Down here, where it was off the bottom of the screen a moment ago because of the resolution of my screen, I can generate a practice quiz. So this could be mid-lesson, and it's based on the calculation you've highlighted. You generate a maths quiz, and it will come up on screen with a little box. It'll ask you how many questions would you like. Well, I might choose 5 questions at the same type of calculation. It generates a quiz, and then down here instantly as a teacher, I've got the quiz embedded on a Microsoft form in my page of my OneNote class notebook. It is multiple choice, but it's based on the calculations that I had previously. The pupils and students press submit and it instantly marks for me. So I haven't got any marking to do as well. So there's another win there. And what I can do is then concentrate on the feedback or concentrate on working with that individual pupil or a group of pupils if they're all facing the same challenge. But it's all come from adopting the maths tool, or pupils can be more independent by using the maths tool, and it frees more time for me to go and work with other pupils and students around the classroom. So there's a lot of really powerful tools that sit here in OneNote class notebook that can be great for you to use. Now, we said that OneNote class notebook is something that can be used by you as a teacher, and the last thing I'm going to do is in the teachers only section, as well as preparing learning resources, and I've got English, writing, maths and science. Some teachers in here keep their planner, so they might add a section in there called planner and that go okay. And in here, what they might do is they might have planner notes that might be week commencing. So I might say this is week 31st of the 8th. And it's up to you how you would write that one out. And then in here, this is where you put your notes, or you might have a teaching assistant or a learning support assistant that works with your class. And this is where your planning could go rather than going in a paper mark book. You might prefer a paper mark book, and hey, you're not going to give that up, and that's fair enough. But it's another way that you could use the teachers only section. Some people decide they don't want to have a planner, and what I have adopted doing is I plan really open lessons now. So if it was, let's say, my English work, it might be an extended writing task. I tend to plan as if I'm going to share my planning with the pupils or students. So I've made the page there. So instead of writing notes separately in a planner and then making the resource, I make the resource, And I tend to make as much of my planning as possible open and transparent to the pupils and students. Now, you might have a note that you need to make that should be private, and that's why it would go in a planner tab and you'd add a page in there. But as far as learning resources are concerned, I don't tend to plan those separately. I tend to be very transparent with those. Plan them in private in the teachers only section, but then put them into the content library or the collaboration space, or distribute them at the same time. Before I go back to the slide deck and I share your code to redeem for today, has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask about the areas we've just covered about creating the content in the pages and managing that learning content? Nothing in the chat. Anybody want to unmute and talk at all? If not, I'll move over. Hello, Emily.
I was just wondering, so all of my students are going to have Surface Pros with the pen. Is
yes.
that does that come under the draw section if they want to use the pen, or if I want to use the pen? I've not had one before.
It absolutely does. So the minute that you pick up their stylus off the side of the Surface from the magnetic dock, it will detect that you've got a stylus in your hand, and it will switch to the draw tab, and then it will allow digital inking.
That's great, thank you.
No problem.
And just one other question. So I teach English to secondary school, so I've got over 100 students with multiple different texts and things. I'm just wondering from experience, because I've not used OneNote before, is it better to have the folders set up on the side by student, or is it better to maybe do it by text and or topic?
Good question. You can.
Does that make sense?
It does make absolute sense. So you can have no students at all. However, you bypass one of the benefits, and the benefits is that each student has their own area to work in. If you were going to have these as texts here, it's going to be a manual add because you can't pick it up from a data sync. So you'd have to put in the name of the text. So if you were looking at Animal Farm or something like that, you could have that there, and then you could create sections within. It is flexible in the way you want to organize it, but most people usually come back to having the names of the students, and then, for instance, having the name of a text as a section inside underneath a student.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
No problem. I suppose one of the other things to consider there, without going too much away from the focus of the session, is that depending on how you set up your teams as well, usually you have one class team per class, and although you might look at different texts, if you're in secondary, for instance, so I go into a secondary here, if I was the head of science and not the head of English, as the head of science in this fictional scenario here, I can see all of my different class teams there as channels. So each time I click on one of those class teams, so if it was English Year 7 Set 3, then I would be able to go to their class notebook at the top when I added it in, and then their class note will be there, and there's textbooks that I look at can sit within there. So you've got levels of complexity depending on how you wish to organise. Any other questions at all? Okay, I will swap back over to the presentation at that point. Right. The resources, I'll pop the links for these into the chat in a moment, but when you go into the Microsoft Education Center, there are a couple of really good OneNote courses. One is Getting Started with OneNote, and if you're at the beginning of your journey, it teaches you all the basics. A lot of what we covered today, so the resources for today are borrowed from there, and it's based upon that. In some of the aspects that I've looked at, they're a little more advanced. I've lifted from Teachers All-in-One Notebook for Students. So everything that you need in the way of going back and referencing what we covered today, you can pick up in the MEC on those two courses. So if you're interested in getting your teeth into a couple of courses that are relevant to you, if you come along today, probably that's the two that you're going to be most used to you. So the code to redeem today to become a certified MIE is there at the bottom of the screen in the yellow box. And I will post that into the chat next if you don't want to try and copy it off the screen. Just for those people that have never done this before, once you're on the Microsoft Education Center, and the link is in the conversation, I posted it in earlier. Once you're signed in, the sign-in box in the top right-hand corner changes to your initials. You click your initials, there's a redeem achievement code option that comes out into that menu, and then in the middle of the screen you'll get a pop-up and that says redeem code, and that's where you enter the code beginning with T, which you see in the top right hand corner of this screen. I'm also going to post that now into the conversation as well, so you can just copy and paste it in. While you're doing that at the same time, I would love for you to give me a little bit of feedback either on today's session, also on anything you'd like to see in future sessions. So there's a very quick evaluation form in there, as well as the code going into the conversation. So while you're redeeming the code and going through the MEC, I'll add in the courses next, but the review form and the evaluation form is there for you to use as well. I'm quite happy to answer any questions, individual questions as well while we're doing this. So if you've got anything that you think you'd like to ask, please feel free to do so. I'm happy to cover anything while everybody's getting their codes redeemed. The code is coming up next. There's the code now for you to pick up from there if you haven't typed it in already. Just going to go and grab the courses. The first course is going to go in the chat now. The first course going in is the Getting Started with OneNote course. A second note is just coming up. Any questions while we're doing this at all? Anybody got any insight into how they're using OneNote or how they've begun to experiment with it if you're just starting? There are the two courses for you also in the chat, so you can click on those two courses, and if you're signed into the MEC, it will take you straight to them in sign-in mode. You can add them to your courses, and there's also a learning pathway as well there if you want to. While people are doing that, then, if you are interested in more Microsoft education courses, you can follow Microsoft on social media. We also promote our own courses as Turn This On, working as a Microsoft global training partner. So you can find us on Twitter, and we tweet quite often. We also promote on LinkedIn, and there's an event site on the company website, which is www.turniton.co.uk/events. If you want to email us and contact us at all, maybe you are looking at making more of Office 365, you email us at office@turniton.co.uk. And what we have is a full range of support for you. So we deliver everything from technical support to MIS systems to project management through to training in CPD. So we have a holistic approach, and we are only focused on education IT. We do nothing else. We're education IT specialists, and also obviously a Microsoft global training partner and a regional delivery partner working in the south of England if you're in the UK. So I'm happy to take more questions, but also I appreciate this is still the end of the holidays, so you might have other things you need to go to. You might be in school getting ready, but a massive thank you for joining me this morning. I really appreciate the time that you've given up to join today, and I will remain here for a few minutes more, but I'm going to stop the recording at this point.